Alright then, so we've already seen how to use vModel with text inputs like this where a user types into the fields, and we've seen how to use it with select boxes. Now I'd also like to show you how to use it with checkboxes too. Now there's two different ways we can use vModel with checkboxes, and I'm going to show you both. And we'll start off with an example at the bottom of the form. So let me first create a div with a class of terms for this form field, and this is going to be for the terms and conditions like you see at the bottom of pretty much every form on the internet. And we're going to create an input field for this of type checkbox, and it's also going to be required. Now we also want a label, and I'm doing this after the input purely for stylistic reasons. So let me say inside the label accept terms and conditions. Alright, so if we take a look at this, it will look rubbish on the page. So now I'm just going to add in a few different styles for this input field. Let me come down to the styles over here and just paste them in like so. So you can see we're targeting the input where the type is checkbox, and then we're displaying this as inline block, so it sits next to the label. Then the width is 16 pixels, bit of margin to the right but nowhere else. And the position is relative, so we can nudge it from the top by 2 pixels. And that's just so it aligns itself a little bit more with the label. So if we take a look at this now, it should look a bit better, and it does. Okay, so we want to track when a user clicks this and unclicks it. Now the way we do that is by attaching a vModel to this input over here. So I'll say vModel, and we need to set it equal to some kind of data property. So let's create that down here, and I'm going to call it terms like that. Now then, this is going to be a boolean, and when a user checks this, that boolean will be true. When they uncheck it, it will be false. All right, so that's how we can track whether a user has clicked this input field, this checkbox. So what I'm going to do is set it to be false to begin with, then set vModel equal to this, which is terms, save it, and we won't see any significant effect. So let's add another statement at the bottom over here to say whether they have accepted the terms. Let's say terms accepted, and we're going to output the terms property. Save that and preview, and we can see down here terms accepted false, but if we click this, then it's true, and then if we unclick, it's false again. Now if you want something checked by default, you can change the initial value here from false to true, and now you can see when we first load, it's checked. Okay, now I'm going to change that back to false to begin with. So that's the first way we can work with checkboxes, by using one single checkbox with a vModel, and then that will be either true or false dependent on whether it's checked or not checked. Now the second way to work with checkboxes is by using an array of values and multiple different checkboxes that belong together. So let me just do an example of this down here. I'm going to create a div, and inside that div I'm going to create another input which is a checkbox like so, and I'm not going to say required here because I don't require a user to check it. If you have terms and conditions, generally you have to check them in order to sign up or something, so that's why that one's required. But this one here is not required, so you can leave it blank or you can check it. Now this one right here is going to have a vModel equal to names. Now I need to make that property down here, names, and I'm going to set that to be an empty array to begin with. We'll find out why in a second. Now I want a label for this, so the label is going to just be a name, and that will be Sean. Alright, so I'm going to duplicate this and paste it down here a couple more times, so we have 3 checkboxes. Each time around, the vModel is always going to be names for each one, and that's because I want to group these together so they all belong to the same kind of data, and this will become clear in a second. Now the label for this one is going to be Yoshi, and then for this one is going to be Mario. Now then, what happens here? Well, they're all using vModel names, and that is an array. So I want to give the user the opportunity to click as many of these as they want and uncheck as many of these as they want. And what I'd like to do is make it so the ones they check, those values, Yoshi and Mario, if we check those, would end up inside this array. Now, the way we do that is by assigning a value to each one of these checkboxes. So I could say value is equal to Sean for this one, much like the label. The value for this one will be Yoshi. The value for the last one is Mario. So now, because they're all connected to the same data, they all use the same data property, this time it can't be a Boolean, because when would it be true and when would it be false? If we click this one but not the other two, would that be true or false? Doesn't make sense. So when we use multiple input fields that are of type checkbox that all have the same vModel data property, then instead we use an array. And then whichever one of these are checked, the value of those goes into the array. So if we check this one and this one, then the array will contain Sean and Yoshi, the ones we checked. Makes sense? So they're the two different ways we can work with checkboxes, either with Booleans for a single checkbox or with arrays of data using multiple checkboxes that belong together. So let's just output those at the bottom. I'm going to say down here, paragraph tag and names, and I'll output the names there. So let me save this. Scroll down here, we can see it's empty to begin with. If we click Sean, Sean's added to it. If we click Mario, that's added to it, Yoshi. And if we uncheck one, then it takes it out of the array. Okay, so there we go. There's the two different ways we can work with checkboxes. Now, I'm actually going to delete this one right here because we don't need it for this form. I just wanted to show you that we can do that, and we might use it later in the course as well. I'm going to get rid of names down here as well, and names down here, so that we're just left with that one single checkbox at the bottom of our form to accept the terms and conditions.